was kind of weak. I don't feel the energy. Good evening. Good evening. Forward together. Not one step back. Forward together. Not one step back. Forward together. Not one step back. I always like to start every meeting and every gathering with that saying, because it's important for us to recognize what we do and why we do it, and that we are not moving backwards. We will continue to go forward, and we will continue to go forward together. We cannot take any steps back, and we cannot win this fight alone, so we must go forward together. All right, it sounds like y'all caught on. All right. So I want to welcome all of you to our Truthful Tuesday teach-in, a part of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. Yesterday, we took action together in 30 states. 30 states. That's something to celebrate. When people all across the country are coming together to say no more to the injustices that impact people's lives. So we took action together in 30 states, claiming our right to live, our right to education, living wage jobs, income, and housing. And just as we have done every Tuesday during the 40 days of action, today we're going to deepen our understanding of the issues of the week. So we're honored to be joined tonight by Professor Cornell West, Mr. Jitu Brown of Journey for Justice, and Mr. Aaron Scott of Chaplains of the Harbor. Usually we would start with some reflections from one of our co-chairs, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, but due to the circumstances, she was not permitted to be here tonight. On yesterday, as we took to the streets and we took to the Capitol, she, along with 8 other of our campaign representatives, were arrested and held overnight for over 24 hours, and just in the last hour, they were released from jail. So we do celebrate their release. Yes. But unfortunately, we won't get the opportunity to hear from her tonight, so we ask that you would continue to lift them up in your meditations and in your thoughts and in your prayers. So if you are here with us, this is a part that I just want you all to participate in collectively. If you're here with us in Washington, D.C., or from around the country tuning in online, I want you to take a moment to let everyone know where you are and what you're doing and what you're standing for. So if you have a smartphone, pull it out. And I know we all have smartphones because it's 2018, right? So pull them out. No beepers, no pagers, right? Pull out your iPhones and Androids. And if you have social media apps, we want you to open up your social media apps, especially Facebook, and go to the Poor People's Campaign page and share the live video on your news feed with the hashtag Poor People's Campaign. And once you've done that, because I'm going to keep talking, once you've done that, I want you to take a selfie with your neighbors, whether you know them or not. Say hello to your new friend, your new comrade, your new buddy in the fight for justice and freedom. And you post that picture on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Snapchat with the hashtag Poor People's Campaign. And if you know a few friendly folks on your social media sites, tag them and tell them to tune in. And if they're not here, tell them they're missing it. All right? So now that that's done, I want to introduce you all to myself, the one who's been talking to you for about 3 minutes now. My name is Reverend Jasmine Brooks, and I am a ministerial intern at the Metropolitan AME Church in Northwest D.C. Yes, give it up for Metropolitan. I'm a 24-year-old full-time seminarian here in D.C. And I don't know if all of us have looked over the 12 fundamental principles of the campaign, but as a black woman who is both a member of the armed forces and poor, I am one of the millions of Americans who is impacted by the issues that are lifted up in our fundamental principles. So in addition to being an Army reservist, I have 2 jobs, and I'm waiting on the confirmation of a 3rd. All the time, my family and my friends are saying, Jasmine, you're too busy. You need to settle down. But the fact of the matter is, I can't settle down. I can't afford to settle down because I have to live. And in my will to make enough money to live on, I also refuse not to do what I love. I refuse not to participate in the fight for justice, and I refuse to be crushed by the perplexities of the issues that are lifted up. I refuse to let my spirit be crushed and my personhood and my identity be crushed because I have to work. So I participate not just because I'm impacted, but because I identify with the morality of the movement, and I align myself with this particular fight for justice and this particular fight for freedom. So that's a little bit about who I am, a little bit about my story and why I'm here, and why I think it's important that you're here and that you share with your networks why you're here and what we're doing while we're here. So that's me. This week's theme is a personal one for me. But I also want to lift up the theme for the week. We'll hear some facts that I hope will get you thinking, because as an elder in the movement once said, we need to make fighters into thinkers and thinkers into fighters. And that is what our Truthful Tuesdays are all about. So before our speakers begin, I want to start off by giving thanks to our camera crew. They are so faithful. Let's shout them out. Our interpreters who make it easy for everyone to be a part. Thank you. Everyone from all across the country who organize watch parties, thank you. To all of our volunteers and the St. Mark's Episcopal Church for opening their doors to us. And to all of you who are here and all of those who are tuned in, because you make this work possible, right? Give yourselves a pat on the back. So I want to bring our theomusicology team back up to lead us in some more of the freedom songs. There is an African proverb that I came across not too long ago that says, where there is no music, the spirit will not come. The spirit will not come if there is no music. So whatever spiritual being you believe in, we want to make sure that we invite that spirit into this space. We want to make sure that we invite that spirit to dwell within us so that we are empowered to do the work that we've came to do, so that we are empowered to take hold of our intellectual capacity as we learn more about the issues that we're tackling today. So if our theomusicology team could come and y'all celebrate them as they come, because they do a good work,
Everybody got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before the we'll all go down to jail. Everybody's got a right to dream. Everybody's got a right to dream. Everybody's got a right to dream. And before right to live. And before the campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail. 'Cause everybody's got a right to live.
Thank you so much. I did not say their names, so I'm just going to call them right now. Sharon, Sashada, and Auntie Lucy, thank you so much. So as I've said before, we're going to be sharing some of the facts that bring us together, because an informed people is a powerful people. And we're not going to be out here in these streets loud and wrong, right? So, fact. 62 million people work for less than a living wage, and yet 25 states have passed laws that preempt cities from raising their minimum wages to living wages. Fact. In 2016, there was no state or county in the country where someone earning the minimum wage could afford a 2-bedroom apartment at market rent. Fact. There are between 2.5 and 3.5 million people who are living in shelters, transitional housing, and tent cities. Fact. 41% of homeless people are black, 47% are white, and 22% are Latinx. Fact. Up to 40% of the homeless youth population are LGBTQIA. Fact. Transgender people are 4 times more likely to live in extreme poverty. These are the facts. Our next speaker is part of a community that is responding to this crisis in unprecedented ways, practicing projects of survival as they build their own leadership for the movement to make the right to live part of our nation and our world. Aaron Scott is an organizer with Chaplains on the Harbor in rural Grays Harbor County, Washington State. He also serves on the Washington State Coordinating Committee and the National Steering Committee for the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. He is happily married to Shelley and the proud papa of baby Moses. So, if we could give him a hearty welcome as he comes to speak for us.
Thanks, everybody. My name is Aaron Scott. I'm the organizer at Chaplains on the Harbor. I'm really excited to be here today. We were in town for the hearing that happened at the Capitol earlier today. So I came here with Christopher Olive, who testified, along with many other folks from around the country. And we just, I want to lift him up, and I want to lift up Nita Cross, who also works with us, 2 of our leaders. Who come up off the streets and out of the jail, and that's the leadership that we're following on the ground. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Grays Harbor County, Washington, where we organize. Grays Harbor County is a rural community on the coast of Washington State. If you've seen some of the maps going around that are part of the educational materials of the campaign, those state-by-state kind of demographic and poverty and injustice maps, they'll show you, segments, wide segments of the county, multi-state segments of the country that are most heavily hit. And usually in those maps, Washington State looks pretty good, right? Like in our heads, we're like Seattle's progressive, like the Space Needle, coffee, rain. And what we miss when we're looking at those maps and the state of Washington looks so good a lot of the time is that we're not always telling the deeper economic story at play there. So Washington State, specifically King County, specifically Seattle, is home to about, I think, 3 of the wealthiest individuals on the face of the planet. And so, I'm not going to name any names, but you can go to Amazon or Microsoft, and they might have time to meet you, they might not. And we are organizing about 3 counties over from that. So there's poverty in Seattle, there's epidemic homelessness in Seattle, epidemic gentrification and displacement. What we're seeing in Grays Harbor County, where we work, is in some ways just the opposite side of the same coin. So we are a rural community, a deindustrialized community. 100 years ago, Aberdeen, Washington was the timber export capital of the entire world. More raw lumber flowed through the port of Aberdeen than any other port in the nation. And with that booming industry, that booming resource extraction industry, there was a really militant, powerful labor organizing history as well. And so what came on the heels of that, of course, was brutal repression. So if you know any of the history of the industrial workers of the world, the Wobblies, this was a hotbed, a central hub of Wobbly activity back in the heyday of the logging industry. By the 90s, when our founder, the Reverend Sarah Monroe, formerly homeless Episcopal priest who started Chaplains on the Harbor, she was growing up on the harbor. By the 90s, that industry was all but gone. The mills had shuttered. This sort of scapegoating of the environmental movement happened, pitting poor and working white folks against environmentalists over the spotted owl. I don't know if you followed any of that. And by the 90s, most of the mills were shuttered. The logging had pretty much packed up and gone to other countries. The main replacement industry for logging in Grays Harbor County has been incarceration. So that's the construction of a state prison, Stafford Creek Prison, but it's also an expansion of all the local jails, the county jail, the municipal jails, through contracts with the Department of Corrections. This is now how the county generates revenue. This is how public funds are generated. And we saw that in the wake of Ferguson with the DOJ report that came out, and that's actually something that's happening in smaller communities all over the country that used to have this industrial base that they don't have it anymore. And that includes juvenile detention. So Grays Harbor County leads the nation at the rate at which we incarcerate children for nonviolent, non-criminal offenses. We do that more than any county in the United States. And this is a rural community. We don't usually talk about the school-to-prison pipeline as a rural issue. It's a rural issue as much as it's an urban issue. The ACLU 2 years ago now, filed a lawsuit against the Grays Harbor County Juvenile Detention Facility for torturing a child, and they won. So this is the backdrop. I say all that to really highlight, people think of homelessness as this standalone issue, that it's not tied to the other issues that we're fighting for on this campaign. It's not tied to, the school-to-prison pipeline. It's not tied to the loss of living wage jobs. It's not tied to the havoc that this resource extraction industry really brought to this community, not just in terms of the land, but also in terms of the people. So what we see with this expansion of incarceration as industry is a big spike in the criminalization of poverty, right? People are worth more when they are incarcerated. These used to be working people. These used to be the people in the forests, in the mills, and at this point, the county generates more revenue from locking them up through some contract with the Department of Corrections than providing for their basic human needs to be met. 46% of Grays Harbor County relies on public assistance to survive. This county it's close to 90% white. It's by some measures, the poorest county in Washington state. Aberdeen, the largest city in the county, is a town of between 16 and 17,000, and there's 1,000 people on the street. So that's not just homeless altogether, that's not just doubled up and in the shelters, that's 1,000 people street homeless, sleeping in tents and alleys. What criminalization looks like, in addition to the expansion of incarceration facilities, is we see a lot of sweeps of homeless encampments. So you probably know about sweeps here in DC. they're similar. People lose everything, right? The police can come and clear an encampment, especially if it's on private property, even if there's no, even if there's no one using the property, and you can lose everything. You can lose your identification, your heart medication, any shelter, any food you've stashed away. With sweeps, but also separate from sweeps as part of the economic apparatus of this incarceration as industry, we see a lot of police brutality and a lot of murder at the hands of police in Grace Harbor County. And again, that's an issue that I think we're used to hearing as that only happens in big cities. And this is killing, strangling a generation of young people, millennials on the harbor, right? We're born into this economy in economic freefall with the shuttering of the mills and the timber industry shutting down, and nothing to replace it except the profit that was made off of their criminalization. So there's an economic incentive for really harsh, really brutal enforcement. Our organizing has challenged this in ways that I think we didn't even expect ourselves. So we do what we call projects of survival. We borrowed that term from the Black Panthers, their history of free breakfast programs, free medical clinics. We're a church, we're affiliated with the Episcopal Church, the Episcopal Diocese of Olympia. So we do things like host emergency cold weather sanctuaries, and we enforce our church space as sanctuary space for anybody with a warrant. We feed anybody regardless of their criminal status, and we believe that religious communities have a right and an obligation to uphold the law of sanctuary, even if that is not recognized by the state. And for us, And what we found out pretty quickly in our community is that that is a moral issue for us first and foremost. It's a religious issue for us. It's an expression of it's our freedom of religious expression, which is constitutionally protected, but it also is an economic threat in this county where you have money being made off of keeping the jails full. If we have a space where we say, the police can't come in here and beat our young people. They can't come in here and take them to jail. They can't come in here when they're trying to get on their feet, trying to get clean, trying to get sober. And that, we realized pretty early on, got us in trouble because that's an economic boycott of that system in a sense, to create these autonomous spaces. So we've supported tent cities. We've taught other churches how to start tent cities that essentially create safe, decriminalized spaces for people to camp. And we saw, in Hoquiam actually, we saw one night, a church in Hoquiam was hosting this small tent city, and after we had said we're not going to allow, this is a sanctuary space. You have to treat these domiciles as domiciles. People have a right. You have to show a warrant. So we had the police show up in the middle of the night and enter a young man's tent without being granted permission to enter, and beating him in the churchyard. I think that, some of the violence that we deal with is really clear, really explicit like that, but we're also dealing with policy violence. We're dealing right now, we just found out through a partnership we're starting to build with some of the mental health workers in the county through SEIU. There's a behavioral health organization responsible for overseeing how Medicaid money, taxpayer money, specifically for inpatient drug treatment and mental health care, $50 million pot that's supposed to be split between our county and 4 other counties, and they haven't spent it. They're just sitting on $50 million that could be split between these 5 counties, including ours, which is the site of one of the highest suicide rates and one of the highest opioid overdose death rates in the state. They're sitting on that money, and that's murder. We did 17 funerals in the span of 18 months a little while ago, all from preventable poverty-related deaths. And I can't tell you how many of those folks would still be alive if that money that was already taxpayer money that was supposed to be spent, that had been approved to be spent for our community, if it had actually been spent, or how many of our young people would not be in prison if that money had been spent the way it was supposed to be spent. So with all of that in the mix, that's a good picture of the plight that we're up against, but we also are really serious about talking about the fight that our communities brings to this movement and to the country. So we have our leaders like Chris, who testified at the Senate hearing today. We do pastoral care and popular education in the jails and on the streets. We're a poor, white, rural community, and we know in the history of this country that communities like ours are really targeted as like ground zero recruitment for white supremacist networks, really preyed on intentionally that way. It's easy to manipulate people's pain that way, and we know that incarceration facilities are the ground zero of the ground zero, right? Where those networks thrive. And so what we have eventually, through our relationships with people, started to do is popular education and counter recruitment from white supremacist gangs. And we've got really powerful connections happening now with some of the folks who have come out of that, connecting face-to-face with organizers from Ferguson, Philly, former Black Panthers, folks from the border. And so when I think about what we do, with really like no budget to speak of, and like crisis after crisis after crisis, just investing in people, investing in our street leaders who we know are the experts on these issues, who are the people who need to be front and center of our work. When I look at what we can do just on our own, and then I see what we can do together when we come together with folks from DC and folks from Flint, I know that we have what it takes to turn this country around. I have seen it happen. So I'm gonna leave it at that, and thank you for having us.
Thank you so much, Aaron Scott, for the work that you're doing across the country and in your community, and thank you so much for your willingness to share with us. We appreciate you. So there was something that I told you we're not going to be, and the teacher in me just has to ask if you remember. So I told you we're not going to be what out here in these streets?
Wrong.
Loud and wrong. We're not going to be what out here in these streets?
Loud and wrong.
All right, so I have some more facts for you so that we will not be out here in these streets loud and wrong.
That's all right.
Fact. There are 140 million poor people in the United States. This includes nearly 2 out of 3 Black and Latinx people who are poor and low income. It includes 4 out of 10 Asian people, and it includes 1 in 3 white people. Because of this, 250,000 people die each year because of poverty and low wealth. American neighborhoods have significantly increased in economic segregation since 1970. Of all students attending high poverty schools in 2013, the overwhelming majority were students of color. Those are the facts. So our next speaker is a part of communities from across the country who are responding to the crisis of education. Jitu Brown is the National Director for the Journey for Justice Alliance. He was born on Chicago's South Side and attended Chicago public schools. He organized in the Kenwood, Oakland neighborhood for over 17 years and helped develop the Mid-South Education Association, a grassroots advocacy group comprised of administrators, parents, teachers, young people, and local school council members to meet the needs of schools. So let's give a warm welcome to Jitu Brown.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
How's everybody doing? What's up? Right. So, first I'd just like to say to the Poor People's Campaign, thank you so much for inviting me here this evening. It's an honor to be on the panel with freedom fighters, and an honor to be in this space with you. Again, my name is Jitu Brown. I'm from the south side of Chicago. Been an organizer most of my adult life. And before I start, I forgot. Before I start, we're going to show you a quick video. So I'm just going to step to the side. Educated across the country,
is the mic, that front mic, the mic's off, eh? All right.
We do not have to be
Is there another mic?
I have no idea why this.
They're not even connected, so I don't know what that is. It's exciting though.
as parents, educate.
Weird.
We board, So, we're going to do the video last to make sure that we can keep the program moving. So, what I like to do.
She started speaking. Oh, I fixed the problem, but I'm not going to fix the problem. I think I know.
In 2013, formed the Journey for Justice Alliance. J4J is a national network of grassroots community-based organizations in a little bit over 30 cities around the country. It was easy for us to unite because we had one thing in common. Whether we were in Detroit, Oakland, New Orleans, Chicago, Philly, we all experienced the label that people said that our schools were failing. We all experienced school closings in our communities and the expansion of school privatization, where private operators invade our communities with schools that every child in our neighborhood can't attend. And we were also experiencing something else very common in that process, that as our schools closed and the rise of charter schools emerged in cities like the one we're in right now, Washington, D.C., we saw that the African American population in those cities also declined. Because what we were seeing was not only was it an issue of education, we're also losing affordable housing, we were losing economic development infrastructure. So we were very clear that school privatization is part of in reality, is not about school choice. The truth about school privatization that it is part of the disinvestment in the lives of a particular group of people. So we began to organize ourselves to build local power to fight school privatization, but also to advance a vision for education equity. Because we realize that the problem in America is not children from the inner city, is not low-income parents, is not bad teachers. The issue in public education is the unwillingness to educate black and brown children like we educate most of the white children. So the issue is equity. You know, in 1954, due to the hard work of brothers and sisters like Thurgood Marshall and many of those organizers, we won landmark litigation, Brown v. Board. The response to Brown v. Board was not contrition. It was not, you know, folks saying, you know, we were wrong for these centuries of brutality. It was actually organizing to stop Brown v. Board. The notion of school choice emerged from that, where white families in Prince George's County pulled all their children out of the public school system because they chose not to send their children to school with us. In Prince David County, they shut down the school system for 5 years. So, and then nowhere was it more concrete than Little Rock, Arkansas, where the Little Rock Nine endured torture for their entire high school career. All because, that did not emerge from some crazy desire for black children to go to school with white children. It was an organizing tactic to say, how do we navigate this hatred? How do we somehow make this system give my child what they give any other child? And they said, well, maybe if our children go to school with their kids, maybe I want us to be clear on that. And so what we're calling for today is a new Brown v. Board, a new fight for education equity. And so what we do in the Journey for Justice Alliance, we have organized what's called the We Choose campaign. Because the one thing we have in common is that they don't listen to us. So whether you are a teacher, whether you are a student, whether you are a parent, whether you are in Eupora, Mississippi, you're in Chicago, Illinois, or you're in Seattle, Washington, corporate interests don't listen to us. And so we said, well, what do we choose? And we said we want 7 things. We want a moratorium on school privatization now. We want 25,000 sustainable community schools by the year 2025. We want an end to zero tolerance policies that sabotage the lives of our children. Think about this. Think about this. We took a policy, and this can be a whole other teaching, but we took a policy from the war on drugs, and we inflicted it on black and brown children in American schools. So if we're honest, how many millions of young people have had their lives ruined because they're seen through a lens of hatred? They're seen through a lens of criminalizing them instead of recognizing that these young people are going through. See, I'm from the block. I'm from 103rd Street on the south side of Chicago, but I'm very clear that children today have a different reality than I had in the 1980s. They go through something a little more intense than what I went through. So how can we justify not understanding the issues of our young people and then viewing them through a lens of white supremacy? We cannot. So that's the third thing we want. We want to create, the next piece that we're looking for is we're saying that we want equity in the United States now, hence the release of our report that we'll talk about in a minute. Also, we're saying that we want an end to state takeovers, mayoral control, and all of these scams that are designed to take away our right to vote in many places. Every city where we don't have the right to vote for our school boards, with the exception of Montclair, New Jersey, in the United States, every city is a black and brown city. So New Orleans, we don't have the right to vote. Philly, we don't have the right to vote. Boston, we don't have the right to vote. Chicago, we don't have the right to vote. Y'all with me? Detroit, Newark, Camden, all right? And all of these cities are cities where we are at. So they take away our right to vote, and then they say we're going to give you school choice, right? We say that school choice is a scam. It's a hustle. It's 3-card Monty. It's pick a card, any card. And what we have to do is we have to understand that what we have not done is demanded that Brown v. Board be realized. We have not demanded it. And we are at fault as well because we've tolerated it. We've actually, to some degree, we've digested a lot of white supremacy's talking points about our own children. But I come to you with an entire adult life. I've worked in some of the roughest schools, and I'm proud to say because of the excellence of my training, there's now one group of young people I can't work with. And what I understand is that if you are consistent, if you set high expectations, and if you work to address the issues that young people are facing in their lives and you make their education relevant, there's no child that can't learn. There's no child. So in the We Choose campaign, we have united organizations like the Alliance to Reclaim Our Schools. We've united the Alliance for Education Justice, the National Youth Organizing Collaborative, both major teacher unions, the AFT and the NEA. We've united Save Our Schools, Badass Teachers Association, Institute for Democratic Education in America. We've united some of the strongest national education networks, Dignity in Schools campaign, and said that instead of us working in our silos, what we need to do is unite for a vision for public education. So we're also calling for the end to punitive standardized testing of our young people. If W.E.B. Du Bois understood in 1940 that standardized testing is about proving the falsehood of white supremacy, if he understood that in 1940, it's inexcusable for us to allow our children to be subjected to that today. Sisters and brothers, what I'm saying, so in the We Choose campaign, we don't dictate to people at a national level what they must do in their neighborhoods. We've built a national platform based off of what people are going through in their cities. And we've won major campaigns around the country. I'm excited because people always think it's hopeless, but we know that there's a movement emerging, not just in education. People are tired of having their lives sabotaged. Now, we enter in education, but we understand, we're very clear that education, housing, economic development, food production and delivery systems, all these things are interrelated. Yes. So I just want to share something with you about the root cause, because we can't play with this. We can't play with it. And we have to be willing to say it. Black, white, and brown, we have to be willing to say it. The core issue that we are dealing with is an unreconciled hatred. A hatred in which this country has never been held accountable for. Not one corporation has been shut down. No reparations have ever been paid. Nobody's gone to jail for the enslavement of our ancestors. Nobody's gone to jail for the destruction of Native American civilization. Nobody has gone to jail for the hatred towards brown people. And since there's never been any real accountability, there's never been any real transformation. How many of you all ever did something wrong and your parents got you? You stopped doing it, didn't you? Basic accountability. Since there's been no real accountability, we are dealing with an unreconciled hatred. That's why what we have in the White House today. Not because there's a movement, because it's always been there. And so that hatred infects every quality of life institution that we have, whether it's policing. That hatred made them kill Eric Garner and lynch him on YouTube. That hatred incarcerates our young people for selling weed. Now weed is some huge industry. And then we have young people doing double-digit prison terms. That hatred is the enemy. And you and me must stop tolerating it. We must have zero tolerance for racism, zero tolerance for sexism, zero tolerance for xenophobia. If we do not, we playing games. While the people who sabotage our communities are dead serious. They are dead serious. So, can we show the video now? Let's go for it, let's go for it. So what we'd like you to do is to just check out if the video plays. The report is called Failing Brown v. Board. What we did, and I want to recognize my sister Beth Glenn, head of our Research and Policy Committee, along with the Metro Center out of NYU. We examined course offerings in black, white, and brown schools in 12 cities around the United States. And the result in every case, am I hearing things? Okay. Organizers work is hard. You know, sometimes you hear voices. But in every case, what we saw was that white children had far more access to inspiration than our children did. So please hear me for a second. What is education? We say that education is inspiration and information that prepare our young people to take their place in the world. So if one young person has world language and another young person does not, if one child has a class with 20 students and a teacher aide and one student has a class with 35 students and no teacher aide, if one student has robotics and the other one does not, if one student has science with science labs and the other student does not, we are denying that if one student has art and music and the other child does not. We are denying that child access to inspiration, access for them to tap into what's inside of them. Teaching is not about shoving information down a child's throat. Any educator in this room knows it's about helping young people get to that moment of self-discovery. That moment of self-discovery allows the teacher to push them further. But if you deny a child that, what can be more evil than that, brothers and sisters? What can be more evil than that? Than to, on purpose, look at a baby and sabotage their future. So we did this report, and what we are organizing around the country are first policy forums with some of our demands, with a lot of our coalition partners around the country. And in the fall, our intent is to make education, justice, an election issue for anybody that wants to get in office. So that's our work. So I want to thank you all. Forgive the freestyle a little bit, but thank you all. We ready to go? All right, so we'll watch this, and then if there are any questions, I'll get out the way. Our report, Failing Brown v. Board, illustrates that we have not even approached equality, let alone equity in public education. We do not have failing schools. As a public, we have been failed. We examined simple course offerings in 12 cities across the United States, and the results illuminate what we all know in our communities. America knows how to educate children, but refuses to educate the Black, the brown, the Native American, and the poor.
In every pairing of high schools we looked at, majority white schools offered more, both in academic content and in the arts, than majority Black or brown schools.
Inequity is key to the lack of investment around the country for kids who are poor and disproportionately Black and brown.
This is simply looking at what some children have access and opportunity for and are succeeding, and what other children do not have.
The crime is that legislators and school administrators have allowed school systems to provide a quality education for some public school students, while allowing students of color and students with less financial means to languish in schools that have endured decades of disinvestment.
Today, as through most of our history, children of color and those living in poverty are disproportionately denied the most challenging and engaging educational experiences.
Please download a copy of the report, organize conversations around this inequity, and then join us in the fight to make sure that all our children have the opportunity to learn. So you can download the report for free at www.
It's early in the morning.
All kinds of trouble. But www.j4jalliance.com, free download. And I'll just ask you all to, listen, if anything sticks with you tonight, just remember that we do not have failing schools. There's a trust that has been betrayed.
Yeah.
When we kiss our babies and we drop them off, we have the right to expect that the way that society operates, that our children will get the education where they can stand on our shoulders. But what we've learned is that we are enduring education sabotage. Now, we have to be comfortable saying it. We got to be honest saying it. Because as long as we try not to insult people or make folks feel uncomfortable, no, we need to feel uncomfortable. We need to feel uncomfortable. We need to deal with that hatred. I want you to understand, as an African American man, as a young man, you feel that that hatred is as real as this floor. And so our work we must be courageous to stand against it. We cannot play with that. We cannot sugarcoat it. So thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Brother Jitu. I often start by trying to raise the vibrations and raise the energy, but I think you have done a good job at making my job easy, so thank you. I'll just go right into the facts this time. Fact. It is often hidden from us that 3 individuals in the U.S. have the same wealth as the bottom 50% of the country. 1 in 5 of our families has no wealth. We owe more than we own. From going to school, we owe more than $1.34 trillion in student debt. Fact. There are 400 people in our country who make $97,000 an hour. Right? Right? Some of us have never even conceived in our mind that that is a possibility. There are 400 people in our country who make $97,000 an hour, while there are others who make $7.25. Fact. Back in 1979, 8 out of 10 poor families with children received AFDC. But in 2015, only 2 in 10 poor families with children received TANF. We refuse the lie that there is scarcity, and we assert the right to life. And for that reason, I have the distinct honor of introducing one of my personal favorite intellectuals and one of my personal favorite voices for the people. Our next speaker is one who has repeatedly asserted that everyone has the right to live. Cornell West is a prominent and provocative democratic intellectual. He is professor of the practice of public philosophy at Harvard University, and we are grateful that he has written 20 books and edited 13 more, including The Radical King, putting into print some of Martin Luther King's strategic visions for the original Poor People's Campaign that has been suppressed by those who find the words too dangerous to the status quo. Tonight, Professor West continues to bring to the Poor People's Campaign a national call for moral revival, his legacy of telling the truth and bearing witness to love and justice. Welcome him.
Give it up for Reverend Jasmine Brooks. Jasmine Brooks. Oh, thank you so very much indeed. Give it up for these 2 freedom fighters. Good job. We want to acknowledge the pastor of this particular church. Where is Reverend Michelle Morgan? Give it up. Michelle Morgan, visionary pastor, St. Mark's Episcopal Church, right on Capitol Hill. Right on Capitol Hill. I want to salute each and every one of you. I'm not going to take that much time. We're here to empower each other. We're here to learn and listen. But at the same time, we want to acknowledge we've had some freedom fighters that go to jail today. Each and every one of them willing to pay the price and take the risk which is required for a poor people's campaign and a poor people's movement in a moment in which this particular empire suffers from such imperial decay and decline. We want to keep our mind, our meditations, our thoughts, and those of us who are religious, our prayers focused on the poor people who are there willing to sacrifice for. They could be our precious indigenous brothers and sisters. It could be poor white, poor black, poor brown, poor yellow, right across the board. I thank God for the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris. I thank God for my dear brother who I've known for so long, William Barber, Reverend William Barber II. They are bringing back what is required, which is not just the spirit of Martin Luther King Jr., the spirit of Dorothy Day, the spirit of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, the spirit of Edward Said, the spirit of a host of others who came before, but it's also reminding us that we live in a moment of such overwhelming spiritual whiteout or blackout. It depends on which term you want to use. The collapse of integrity and honesty and decency and courage and generosity. When you look at those statistics that we're talking about greed running amok at the top, people feeling as if they can do anything, say anything, get away with it because they're unaccountable, unanswerable, and don't have to be responsible. There's a long history of that, but now the chickens are coming home to roost. We're reaping what you sow. You can't be based on genocide and African slavery and somehow think you're not going to have to deal with the consequences and the effects. You can't treat working people as if they're just some marginal utility to be exploited so your profits can go up, and don't think chickens don't come home to roost. You can't have patriarchal households and treat women in vicious ways, domestic violence, violation of their humanity, losing sight of the humanity of our precious gay brothers and lesbian sisters, or our precious trans folk. Each and every one of them made in the image of God, which means what? Which means that they have magnificent dignity and sanctity. And if you really believe that, then you need to join this movement. Because anybody who really cares about people, let alone poor and working people, it means that you hate injustice. So we need some haters of injustice. I've been called a hater, and I always say you got the right black man. Because as a Christian, I believe in charitable Christian hatred. I hate sin, but I try to love the sinner. I hate injustice. I hate patriarchy. I hate capitalist modes of organization in which working people are pushed. I can't stand white supremacy. I can't stand male supremacy. I can't stand those who hate Muslims or Arabs or Jews. Mexicans, which means what? Which means we have to have a moral and spiritual revival. And that's what Martin King was all about. Like Ida B. Wells, when it came to American terrorism, she was an abolitionist. She got to abolish lynching, abolish American terrorism, like Frederick Douglass. You got to abolish slavery. Well, here we are in the 21st century. We got to abolish poverty. We got to abolish low-quality education. We got to abolish wages that still are exploitative. We got to abolish the subordination of women. We got to abolish the violation of gays and lesbians. We got to abolish those relationships between bosses and workers where bosses can make 400 times the amount of wages for workers. And what a moment to live in, because the imperial meltdown is taking place. We ask our indigenous brothers and sisters, the original sin of America was not slavery. Quit telling that lie. The original sin was the treatment of indigenous brothers and sisters, which means that America is not just a democracy with a deficit. It's an empire that tried to have democratic practices, and we're now losing those practices owing to greed at the top. So it's not just Donald Trump. Don't fetishize some individual. He is as American as cherry pie. The roots of Donald Trump been in place for a long time. But I'm also here to say that Fannie Lou Hamer and Nina Simone and John Coltrane and Curtis Mayfield, Chicago, and Bruce Springsteen and Bob Dylan, they are as American as cherry pie too. And the question is, which America is going to triumph? That's the question. And the Poor People's Campaign simply says, we still have the audacity. We still have a vision. Where there is no vision, the people perish. We still have a willingness to be courageous to say, you know what? We're going to have truthful Tuesdays, which means what? The condition of truth is always to allow suffering to speak. Everybody's suffering, not just a slice. Not just a slice. Part of our problem is we haven't had movements that were sensitive enough and in solidarity enough with suffering across the board. Everybody just wants their suffering center stage. That's a truncated spirituality. That's a narrow morality. These days, either we all come together and hang together, or we all hang separately. That's what a neo-fascist America is. The rule of big money, big military, xenophobic, and scapegoating the most vulnerable rather than confronting the most powerful. And that's what this movement is all about. And that's why I'm just so very blessed to be just a very small part of it. Now it's true, we tried to have a anti-poverty struggle under Barack Obama. Oh, we got in trouble then, didn't we? You had that brilliant, poised black face of the American empire who didn't want to talk about poverty, who gave Wall Street bailouts, and not one Wall Street criminal went to jail. But when it came to expansion of mass incarceration, let Jamal get caught with a crack bag. Let Juanita get caught with marijuana, gone to jail. How many Wall Street elites went to jail? Not one of them. Black president, black attorney general, black homeland security, black folks still catching hell. If you're poor and working class, if you're black middle class, you're breakdancing to the bank because you're so glad that somebody like you is in power. Oh yeah. But it's got to be said in love, you know, it's got to be said in love. I'm a Christian, I love everybody now. But again, if you're starting with the least of these, those in prison, the children locked in the hoods and inadequate education and indecent housing, dealing with the drugs and the guns, their realities are the lens through which you look at the world, not stock market, not Wall Street, not professionals at the top. And if they're not focusing on those realities, then they end up reproducing the same hierarchies. And that's exactly what happened. The top 1% of the population still got 95% of the income growth. Why? Because they're in the driver's seat. And you have to have these kinds of coming together with all the different colors and genders, sexual orientation, saying, yes, we stand in the reality of who we are, but we're tied to something bigger than ourselves. We tied to a spirituality and a morality that has to do with focusing on a suffering and a misery that must be addressed, not just here, but around the world. In the Middle East, we say explicitly, a Palestinian baby has the same value as a Jewish baby. A Jewish baby has the same value as a Palestinian baby. Those drones need to be accountable. In Africa, with military presence, African, expanding all the time, we have to have a global perspective, even given our local rootage. Why? Because we want to be morally consistent and have some spiritual integrity. And in that sense, for me, it has everything to do with being true to the best of the people who underwent blood, sweat, and tears for us. Because I come from a people who have been chronically hated for 400 years and still are, and yet taught the world so much about how to love truth, to love goodness, to love beauty. Like Mama in A Raisin in the Sun, never been a figure in the history of the American stage with so much love. Listen to John Coltrane's Love Supreme. Listen to Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. Listen to Nina Simone's Mississippi Goddamn. Listen to Stevie Wonder's Love and the Need of Love. Read Toni Morrison's Beloved. Read the love soaked essays of James Baldwin that says love forces us to take off the mask. We know we cannot live within, but fear we cannot live without. That's what the Isley Brothers call a caravan of love. That's where I come from. That's me. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And I'm a crack vessel, yes. Donald Trump's a gangster. He's a thug. But when I call him a gangster and thug, I say to myself, I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and I'm a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. So I ain't name calling, I'm not finger pointing, I'm talking about something inside of me. I I got to get that homophobia outside of me. I got to get that transphobia out of me. I get that patriarchy out of me. I got to get that imperial sense of an American baby has more value than a baby in Ethiopia or a baby in Guatemala out of me. All of us have to wrestle in that way. It's not just a matter of name, but that's what this movement is about. That's what we love about Sister Liz and Brother William. Namely, that they're willing to stand on the best of that tradition. And we got to pass that on to the young folk. Because believe me, when Brother Martin Luther King used to say, when every day people straighten their backs up, they're going somewhere because folk can't ride your back unless it's bent. That the sleepwalkers that's been going on, their very backs constitute the foundation of the society. And once they begin to wake up and straighten their backs up, there's a threat to the status quo. And anytime you threaten the status quo, you're doing the Lord's work. Oh, yes, you are. You wading in the water. God's going to trouble that water because God is concerned about the oppressed, concerned about the subjugated. You're going to allow yourself to be used by something bigger than you, and then you can turn on some of Curtis Mayfield and understand what he's talking about when he said, people get ready. Are you ready to get on that love train? Don't need no ticket. Just get on board, but get your vision in place. Get your courage in place. Shatter the indifference, shatter the callousness. That's what we need. And the only way you do it is love. That's what breaks the back of fear. You're being intimidated and scared. You got to break it with love. Because that's what allows you to pay the price. You love your mom and somebody talking about her and gonna say they're gonna put a bullet. You jump in the front of that bullet. Why? Because you love her so. Same is true for the other folk you love. We got to love poor people. We got to love working people in that way. And once you have that kind of spiritual revival, that kind of moral revival, lo and behold, the powers that be begin to not just tremble, they begin to fall. Because they are mighty, but there's something that's almighty, and that is the love of poor people and working people when we wake up, when we come together, and when we still put compassion at the center, given our understanding of capitalism, imperialism, patriarchy, homophobia, transphobia. These are not just abstract categories. These are vicious evil forces that try to crush folk into poverty. And black people, we know, have had the challenge of always having too much poverty and not enough self-love.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
You abolish poverty. Get your self-love and self-respect and self-determination, not predicated on putting others down, but putting you on a continuum with humanity. That's what we're about. Thank God that we're on the move.
So grateful, Dr. Cornell West, for your ability to speak the unadulterated truth about this nation and the people in it. We are grateful for you. Thank you. Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
Forward together.
Not one step back.
We are committed to going forward together because we recognize that everybody's got the right to live. But we also recognize that the fact of the matter is this. Millions of us, both in the United States and across the globe, have been impacted by the interconnectedness of these identified issues, and we have been denied the right to live. Our policies have degraded life and the environment and has prioritized private, corporate, and financial interests over the sanctity of life. This is not because of a scarcity of resources, but it is in the midst of great abundance and wealth. We have a fundamental right to life and all that makes life possible and meaningful, including dignified jobs and living wages, housing, education, health care, welfare, the right to live, and the right to organize for the realization of these rights. That's enough to celebrate over.
Yes, it is.
So knowing this, We demand the immediate implementation of federal and state living wage laws that are commensurate for the 21st century economy. We demand the right for all workers to form and join unions. We demand equal pay for equal work. When I finish every demand, I just want y'all to say "Ashe," which means I agree. We're going to let the people know that we in agreement in this room. It's not just me making these demands. It's the campaign, and the campaign is the people, okay? So when I finish reading these demands, y'all just say "Ashe." Y'all got to talk back to me. We demand guaranteed annual income. We demand fully funded anti-poverty programs that protects the welfare of all. We demand decent, safe public housing for the poor. We demand a budget that promotes the general welfare of all people. We demand fully funded welfare programs for the poor and an end to the attacks on SNAP, HEAP, TANF, and other vital programs for the poor. We demand equity in education and an end to resegregation of schools. We demand free tuition. I ain't even done. But yes, we demand that free tuition. We demand free tuition at public colleges and universities and an end to profiteering on student debt. We demand equitable funding for historically black colleges and universities. We demand relief from crushing household, student, and consumer debt. We demand the repeal of the 2017 federal tax law. We demand that the wealthy and corporations pay their fair share of our country's urgent needs around decent and affordable housing, free public education, a robust social safety net, and social security. These are our demands. We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, and we refuse to be silent anymore. Forward together. Forward together. And as we go forward together, we recognize that tonight has been wonderful. We have had some exceptional guests tonight. Let's celebrate them. We have been led in song. Oh, I'm sorry. We have been led in song by our gifted sisters in the movement, so let's celebrate them as well. And so while tonight has been wonderful and exceptional, we do also understand that tonight is just one night of many, right? The fight must go on. We must go forward together. So I want you to take out your notepads so that you can take down these dates and these locations. So you can meet us when Cornell West is not here, when Jitu Brown is not here, when Aaron Scott is not here, when our theomusicologists are walking away. They ain't never gonna leave us. But we want y'all to be there. So June 23rd, mark that date in your calendar for our final rally and the close to our 40-day campaign, but the beginning of our multi-year campaign, because we recognize that this 40 days is just the launch. This is just the beginning. So June 23rd, mark that date in your calendar. On Thursday, every Thursday, we meet at Bloom Bars in Northwest. That's Northwest, right? At Bloom Bars in Northwest, where we have our theomusicology event. It's our Thursday Justice Jam, where we hear music and poetry. And if you've been following our pages, you know just how excellent it has been. So we want you to meet us there at 7:30 on Thursday evening. All right, all next week we'll be on the National Mall, so we want you to meet us there. Get on. If you are not already plugged into what's happening, we want you to get involved and sign our online pledge card so that you can receive the emails. If you're not already following us on social media, please make sure you follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. We all over the place, okay? So sign up so you can get the emails, and if you want to know where we are, when we're going to be there, and what time, there will also be postings all over our social media. So, in closing, we'll have our theomusicologists to come back and lead us in another song. So let's celebrate them as they come.
I went down to the National Bank and I took back what it stole from me. I took back my dignity, took back my humanity. It's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. Ain't gonna let no national bank walk all over me.
One little caveat there. When we say it's under my feet, I want you all to also yell out, where? Under my feet.
Where?
Under my feet.
Where?
Under my feet.
Where?
Under my feet.
Where? I went down to the National Bank and I took back what it stole from me. Took back my dignity, humanity. Took back my humanity. Well, went down to the National Bank and I took back what it stole from me. Took back my dignity. Took back my humanity. Well, it's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. And I'm gonna let no national bank walk all over me. Went to the rich man's house. I went down to the rich man's house. Took back what he stole from me. Took back my dignity. Took back my humanity. Well, I went down to the rich man's house and I took back what he stole from me. Took back my dignity. Took back my humanity. Well, it's under my feet, under my feet, under my feet, under my feet. Ain't no
system gonna walk all over me. Ain't no system.
Well, I went down to the Congress and I took back what they stole from me. Took back my dignity. Took back my humanity. Well, I went down to the Congress and I took back what they stole from me. Took back my dignity. Took back my humanity. Well, it's under my feet, under my